Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're digging into a truly mind-bending framework straight out of the White Book, meaning unconfounded. It proposes something completely wild. The idea is that the English language isn't just some random collection of arbitrary labels that we all just sort of happen to agree upon over time. Instead, it argues that language is a physical, mathematical code that literally renders reality. I know, it's a massive concept, but the evidence presented in the text is absolutely fascinating. Okay, let's dive right into this. So what if language isn't just arbitrary labels? Think about it. We're traditionally taught that a cow is called a cow simply because, well, humans a long time ago just pointed at it and agreed to make that sound. But this source material completely flips that perception on its head. It proposes that your mouth is actually demonstrating the physical meaning of a word exactly as you speak it. The physical action itself is the meaning.
I actually want you to test this with me right now. Seriously, do this as you're listening. Step 1, close your lips. Step 2, trap the air inside your mouth. And Step 3, let it resonate and hum. You're making the letter M, right? But according to the text, you aren't just making some random arbitrary sound. You are literally, physically building a contained space for material substance right there in your own flesh. And this brilliantly illustrates why almost every core word starting with M perfectly aligns with the creation of material substance. Just think about it for a second. Words like matter, mass, mother, moon, mud, milk. All of these represent primordial material substance, or the very things that make it. The text argues this proves it's absolutely not a coincidence. The physical act of closing your lips and trapping that resonance is the act of creating matter. And the dictionary reflects this flawlessly. Okay, let's try another one. This time, I want you to close your lips, build up some pressure behind them, and then release it in a quick, sharp burst. B. You just made a B. Notice how you created a boundary and then you broke it? It's a bounded space with a purpose, and that's exactly why words like body, box, border, and beyond all start with B. You're physically spelling out a boundary with your anatomy before the word even finishes leaving your mouth.
And that brings us to a massive philosophical paradigm shift presented in the source. Here's the quote. "The universe was not created from nothing. It was written." The author is making the case that mathematical truth is the primary foundation of existence, and physical phenomena, well, they're just the subjective rendering of that math. So the code wasn't invented by humans, it was discovered by us.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to ask a pretty fundamental question. Can absolute nothing actually exist? The source argues that zero everything is literally a mathematical impossibility. Why? Because the very framework required to even understand the concept of absence has to exist in the first place. Therefore, existence and the structural mathematical code underlying it has just always been there.
To explain how all of this flows, the book outlines a 9-layer architecture of reality. It starts all the way at the very top with pure consciousness, which is layer 1. That consciousness then filters down, layer by layer, through abstract postulates, then it turns into numbers, and then into logic. But here is the truly awe-inspiring part. The whole thing ends with the human mouth acting as a literal 3D printer for mathematical code. When you speak, you are actively executing layer 8 of this ancient architecture.
Which brings us to the actual map of this 3D printer. The articulation point of a sound, meaning exactly where it happens inside your mouth, actually determines its spatial domain. At the outermost edge, the lips, we have B, P, and M, which deal with boundaries and physical form. Moving into the middle, at the tongue ridge, we find T, D, and N, which deal with the marking and transition. And all the way at the inner palate, the back of the throat, we have K, G, and H, which are the sounds of interiority and growth. Where the sound happens is exactly where the meaning lives. Now, what's really interesting about this is how your vocal cords act as a literal physical switch between projecting and containing. Let's compare the unvoiced P and the voiced B. They both use the exact same lip position, right? But P is unvoiced, so it projects. It's a released burst of outward force, kind of like the word project. B, on the other hand, uses your vocal cords to contain the sound, creating a held boundary like the word box. You are literally turning containment on and off using your throat.
But wait, the code doesn't stop at just the letters themselves. We just saw how where a sound happens in your mouth gives it meaning. Now we have to look at where a sound happens inside a word. This is called the positioning rule, and it basically says position is meaning. The exact same consonant completely changes its function based on whether it's at the start, the middle, or the end of a word. At the start, it initiates the action, in the middle, it sustains it, and at the end, it arrives at completion. So a letter's location dictates exactly how its core meaning is deployed into action.
Let's look at a perfect example of this in action. Compare these two words, spread and spray. They both start with SPR. They both project and radiate outward. But listen closely to that final consonant. Spread ends with a firm D, which signifies an arrived destination. Boom, the action finishes. Spray, however, ends with a lingering Y, which signifies an ongoing deed. The energy just keeps going. By changing just one single final consonant, you completely alter the physical physics of the action.
This reveals what the source material calls the end-time operator timeline. The final consonant is quite literally the temporal anchor of any action. If a word ends in D, it's arrived at completion, a past perfect state. T means it's sealed tightly in the simple past. R means it's still radiating in the present continuous. N means it is continuing into the present or the future. And Y is an ongoing deed in the pure present. The grammar of time itself is built right into the consonants. So, the crucial point is, even the silent letters matter. They aren't just historical accidents or careless spelling mistakes. They are structural exclusion anchors. Take the silent K in no. It holds the knowledge contained, silently. The silent GH in night holds growth and breath silently, which makes the word feel structurally older and deeper than the modern simplified spelling NITE. And the silent K in knock? That's the containment you hold right before the strike of your fist. These letters carry heavy semantic weight without even being voiced.
All of this leads us to an absolute climax in the source material. Think about it. If this theory holds true, then the most fundamental, abstract words in our entire language should structurally define themselves through their consonants. Let's move to and see how this builds.
Take the word word itself, W-R-D. According to the code we just learned, W is connecting, R is radiating, and D is directed arrival. So, the word word literally spells out its own function. It connects a radiating meaning and delivers it directly to a destination.
How about truth? T-R-T-H. T is a mark, R is radiance, T is another mark, and H is breath. The text shows how truth maps perfectly to its consonant architecture. It is a marked radiance that crosses the threshold of breath. The word itself is the exact physical process of what it means to be true. It's kind of mind-blowing.
And then there's consciousness. Just take a look at the architecture of this word. C-N-S-C-S-N-S-S. I want to slow down here and let this realization really sink in for a moment. C is containing, N is continuing, S is spreading. So the word consciousness structurally defines a field that contains its own continuation, that contains its own spreading, and that continues to spread. The word is literally a field aware of its own diffusion. The system recognizes itself.
Which leaves us with a final, highly provocative question. Are you just a passenger on a random rock flying through space? Or are you the author of the universal text? The White Book makes the case that every single word you speak is a physical, mathematical postulate writing your reality into existence. You aren't just describing the world around you, you are rendering it with every single breath. It's an incredibly profound way to look at the language we use every single day. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the code around you.